and welcome back to Magic in the Noise. Today we have great remote viewing results to share with you. We did some interesting targets, and to begin, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. So I'm Sasha, Magic in the Noise, and here we have David.
Hi, my name is David. You can maybe see from the right there.
And Patrick Flanagan. Do you want to say hello?
Hi, Patrick Flanagan from Galway in Ireland, representing Ireland.
Claudia?
Hi, I'm Claudia from Holland, Amsterdam.
Nice.
Hey everyone, I'm Chris from Belgium, also known as Chilio, as my nickname on the different platforms.
Nice.
I'm Patrick from the Netherlands as well.
Hi, I'm Cody from Australia.
Hey, I'm Michael. I'm from Canada. For now, I'm hanging out the same mansion that Jeff is.
And I'm Jeff, so I'll be playing the piano later. Just
That would be
Chicago.
That would be nice, actually. So what we're going to do today, we have results from sessions that were worked on the Qinshihuang Mausoleum or tomb. And in relation to that, the Terracotta warrior army. And then after that, we will be doing feedback and analysis of our surprise guest target from Jeff. And then we will have a conversation about displacement. So if you're interested in becoming a better remote viewer, solving the displacement problem can really be important, significant, and help you move forward. So we're going to talk about that at the end after we've done the feedback and analysis. And so does anyone want to say something before I jump into the results? No, good. Okay. So let me screen share, which is always a little bit tricky. And requires a little bit of and I'm just sharing my screen, making sure we get the right ones. That's the one. And then, can you see it now? No, now you can, yes? Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so the target for this month, the Qinshihuang's Mausoleum and the Terracotta Army, I did it in 2 steps. So I had the target and then the retask. So the retask was the Terracotta Army because it's at the mausoleum. It's in it. It's related to it, and it's a part of it. And so rather than have it as a subtask, I thought that would be too much information for remote viewers. There's so much data. And so I thought, okay, your first target is just the mausoleum in general to see people can explore whatever they find most interesting. And then I gave a retask, which was specifically the Terracotta Army. In each target, I gave a subtask as a general, if the viewer is interested, they can explore this. And that's more, I think, as well for intermediate to advanced level remote viewers. You can use a subtask to point them to a specific direction, and they'll still get the main target data. And so I subtasked the use of Mercury because Qinshihuang used Mercury in his model of Shanghai that he built within this mausoleum, but he also used it as medicine and trying to become immortal. And that's actually, there's one theory that that's what killed him, that it was mercury poisoning. So I thought that would be interesting. And oh yeah, so this is just, here's an image of the model of Shanghai as it might appear. So it hasn't been shown to the public, as close to the public, because the mercury is so poisonous and there's such high levels of it. But that's what they're suggesting that it looks like. And then the retask was the Terracotta Army Mausoleum, and the subtask for this was hand purple. Hand purple is a really special pigment that was developed in China, and this is 2,000 years ago. And it has some really interesting quantum properties that we're going to discuss later that some of the viewers were able to pick up on, which was incredible to see. And so that was really exciting. And then this is just some imagery about what you're going to see from the medical data. So to start out, the mausoleum, there's kind of a pyramidal artificial construction, and then there are all kinds of subtunnels and rooms down below it. And so we have Claudia here who drew the square, which is the main public place, and then the pyramid. And I think the relation in terms of the size and the dimensions is really nicely accurate. And I should note, along the bottom here, you'll see the color-coded for each remote viewer that participated. John Dixon did some great work. Unfortunately, he can't join us today. It's Father's Day in some places, and so that kind of interferes a little bit with people's availability. But so Chris is purple, Claudia is pink, Jeff is kind of a soft gray, Cody is red, John Dixon is yellow, Michael orange, Dutch Patrick, that is Patrick Anderkerk, is blue, and Irish Patrick, which is Patrick Flanagan, is green. And so Claudia, you did amazing work. I think really early in your session, you mentioned that maybe the South China Sea area for this target. That's perfect. Of course, it's in China. So that was amazing. And Dutch Patrick, you drew the pyramid with a flat top. And so I thought that was amazing to see in your session. And also feel free to stop me and jump in. I can't see your faces at the moment because I'm looking at my display screen to make sure that that's working. So do feel free to interrupt and jump in if you want to tell us a little bit about your data or how it came to you. This picture down here, so you see the pyramidal structure, and then these are the excavation sites where they found the Terracotta Army, they found the horses, terracotta horses, they found all kinds of gold objects and things like that. So it just gives you a sense of the layout. And this is Jeff as well, picking up on the pyramid. Patrick, as well, you have the flat-topped pyramid, and then you have the two squares. A lot of people picked up on these two squares. It was really interesting to see how it came through in their sessions. And Cody just wrote pyramid in one of his early pages, so that was really nice. That was excellent. And then Chris, you had this image upside down in your session. And I think it actually relates to two different sets of data. And I think often good remote viewing is multi-layered, so you can use one element of a session and it'll have multiple meanings that are valid and relevant. And so I thought, you have the square with the circular object in the center and then the pathway leading out. And so I actually did think it was a nice match for the physical description, but it will come to play later as well. And then here's just more, we have Chris, we have Patrick, we have Cody having this multi-leveled natural materials used for a man-made structure. And so there's that pyramid covered in trees. And Patrick, again, the shapes were really clear coming through to you as the square and the pyramid. Chris, you had these steps leading into it. And then you had an overview of the pyramid. And your structure one, your overview here, I think it's funny because in my session on The Hobbit that we're releasing this week, I have nearly the exact same drawing for my pyramid as well, that overview. So I thought that was funny to see. It looked like my data. And you described it as tiered, rectangular, and diagonal. And Irish Patrick, you also had the steps, the AOL steps, you had the step structures, and again, there's something more intriguing, and it'll come up, I think, maybe in the next slide. But yeah, I thought that was really nice because the way that it's built looks like it was in 3 tiers of 3 steps. So that was amazing to see that level of precision in your data. And Jeff, as well, you had the top overview, you have the square top, and then the pyramid underneath. So that to me fits in well with Chris's overview. And Patrick, again, you have the stones of the pyramid and the square in front of it. So that was all great data. Now, the subterranean aspect, everyone picked up on, buried treasure we have here from Irish Patrick, treasure hunt from Cody, scientific historical mystery from John Dixon. And it was really interesting to see both Jeff and Cody quote hidden in plain sight. That was really fun to see the exact same quote in the two separate sessions. Hidden complex, says Claudia. So everyone's kind of picking up on this. Cody, I love that you had tomb, and here this was amazing. Indiana Jones stuff about the tomb, and it's so precise because that's exactly what it is. It's this huge pyramid, and then you go down under the pyramid, and then you have these warrior statues, and you have gold and treasures, and then you have this dangerous model of the city of Shanghai with liquid mercury that will poison you with the vapors. And so I thought that was such a perfect description of the data and the Indiana Jones kind of story. That was perfect. And then Patrick as well feels like there's some inside somewhere, right? And Cody's saying feels is subterranean. So I thought the archaeological dig, John Dixon as well was like, something digging into the ground. So you guys are really, really good at picking up the basic elements of the target. That was really nice to see. And Cody, you had the sense that they're looking in the wrong spot. That's really good data. I've had that in a session as well where the location was important. And I was like, David and I were to target on the lost crown jewels of Ireland. And I had that same compulsion to say they're looking over here, but that's not where the crown jewels are now. They're over here. And so I recognize that in your data, that same compulsion to pick up on people are looking for something and they're looking in the wrong spot. That's really good for a remote viewer to be able to identify, because then the next step is, okay, so then where is the right spot, right? So that was great. Here we have the layout, the overview of the basic mausoleum. So we have the horse graves are here, the Terracotta army are at the far right on this image, the pyramids in the center. We have bronze horses, and then all these walls all around it. And so John had, I think this is a combination, again, I think it's a multi-layered data that's coming through, but he has that pathway to the pyramid and the step pyramid at the end. Patrick, you kind of had this same imagery coming through multiple places in your session. The pyramid, the square, and then something underneath. You had the type of a feel of a deep well. And so that's all good data. That was really nice to see. Oh, is someone wanting to talk? Like I said, you'll just have to jump in and just start talking. So that
Everything makes sense now. Yeah.
yes. Okay,
It's very
good.
interesting. Yeah.
And here, Patrick, you had this squared surface, right? And that is, right, if you think about the amount of design that went into creating this, the years of designing this, I think a lot of people were picking up on these elements because there was so much intention that was focused on this at the time 2,000 years ago. And so I thought that was really good. And John had the idea of a concourse. Jeff, you had this idea of a man-made path. And then the idea of linked or connected across a large area. It almost looks scattered. I thought that was an excellent piece of data from John. So yeah, that was nice. And then Cody, here you have brown earthy color, and we're going to see underneath in a few slides, and that's great data, below ground, and it's a divided up area. Even though it's a rough sketch, I still can see the relationship between your sketch and the layout of the mausoleum. So I thought that was excellent data because you have this kind of underground area here and you have the pathways here. So I thought that was fantastic. And then John gives us a dense but intermittent spacing, and that fits as well. These, if people want to talk to me about these, I would love to hear more about it, because I'm wondering, were you picking up on the trees? Were you picking up on something else? Were you picking up on the design? But a lot of people had these squares with the dots in them. So Chris, you had them as metallic, and I'm actually, it's so funny because I'm seeing it now and it's clicking. This has to do with, they did boreholes, and I talked about it later in the session, where they were testing for mercury contamination in the soil. And so they drilled all these holes all over the site. Yeah, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, it's related to the AOL that I have there. So the impression that I had was really like in I'm not sure you say that in English, but like yeah, a conference hall where you have different topics and different things with different spaces, and you can go to different places. I have the feeling that there were a lot of different spots with different stuff and different topics that were connected between them somehow. That was the general idea. So like a conference hall where you would go to one session then to another session. That was basically my AOL.
Yeah, that was fantastic data. And Jeff, you had nearly the exact same data. Did you want to say something about what you're feeling with that, or was it just kind of a basic percept?
So my comments on that was that it was a frosted window, that it was allowing some light to come through, but not all of the light. So like a filter.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think Michael, you also had the boreholes, and I'll show that in a later. When I get to that point, let's remember these images from Chris and Jeff because I think they relate really well. And then Michael, you also had a great layout of a compound with buildings, and I thought that was really really nice overview.
Thanks.
Yeah. And so then we come to the tunnels. Claudia, you drew nearly the exact same tunnel as Irish Patrick, so that was fantastic to see. And then both Irish Patrick and Cody, you guys both picked up on the three tiers for each level, and that was amazing to see. And Cody, you had that it was underground. That was amazing work. Do you want to say something about this, Cody?
Yeah, I just thought it was tunnels under like a city or something. I thought it leads to some treasure.
And it does. That's exactly what it is. And there is treasure down there. And Patrick, I'm curious, were you aware of the fact that you were repeating the 3 tiers, or was it more of a subconscious thing that they were in groups of 3?
I'm trying to remember back. I mean, I remember. I kept getting the tree, but I didn't feel like I didn't feel the inclination to do any more. You know, so it was I was always just going with my kind of hunch. I wasn't sure why, but the tree did seem significant at the time. As for the tunnel, yeah, I definitely felt something that was going underground because I kept getting that kind of AOLs in my head of, you know, those kind of bases that are underground, Dulce or whatever they call that base. That kind of thing was those kind of ideas were triggering me to this is underground. It's not above ground, you know?
Yes. Yeah, that was excellent to see. And it's interesting to see, you know, it's that automatic writing aspect, or it's that you do 3 and then you stop at 3 and you think, yeah, that's enough. And you don't know why that's enough, but that's enough. And then ends up, that's describing the pyramid.
Yeah.
Cody, you had so much excellent work here. So again, you have the modern at the ground level, and then all these underground tunnels that they're all connected, and there's stuff hidden down here. That's a perfect description right there of the target. So really gold star for that. Yeah, hidden beneath a modern area, and you had the steps going down. So that was fantastic data. And then John as well. So here's a little bit about the Shanghai city model underneath. It's interesting, and this is where it ties in with Cody's data about the Indiana Jones feel to it. There were booby traps all through the mausoleum underground, so they're to prevent thieves from coming in and stealing all the gold and all the amazing objects, art objects down there. So it is interesting. And then it just talks about here the mercury was used to fashion imitations of the 100 rivers, the Yellow River, the Yangtze, and the seas, constructed in such a way that they seem to flow. And then above were representations of all the heavenly bodies, so the stars, the sky, the sun and moon, and then below the features of the earth. So it's just this amazing model. And this, for John, I kind of saw a little bit of relationship with the shape. And so I thought that might be what he's picking up on here. This rounded dome structure, a few people picked up on. So there might be more to it. There might be something down there that we haven't seen, that we're not privy to, that this is describing. But without that feedback, I can only match it to that. And I think John saying sort of epoxy runs in and out of the structure, that's amazing data because, yeah, there's mercury that's running in and out. And I just saw someone drop. So, Jeff, there you go. You're back in. And so, yeah, I think that was this idea of this fake epoxy running in and out. That's good. Chris, I thought these were really good representations of these little mini towers. The shape seems to really have captured people's attention. And you had the red thing here. Do you want to say something about this, Chris? Because I thought that was really amazing data.
I don't have a lot to say about it, but throughout that session, I often had that feeling that there was something red on the floor.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting, the level of detail you were able to pick up on. So this is the mock-up of the tomb itself, and there's the red in the center there. And again, so Michael, your compound with buildings is also matched with this kind of tiled aspect of this. Irish Patrick, you have the ribbed and rigid. I think people were picking up on some of these elements of what was down here, and John as well. And when I'm seeing patterns like this, like what Patrick is drawing is very close to what John is drawing. And so there's that similarity. Claudia, you picked up on this, I think, more as a realistic scenery landscape. So you have the building, and then you have the beach, you have the ocean. I thought that was really good data.
Yeah, I thought maybe this the water. What I saw was it the mercury.
Yeah.
Because I had a few that I came somewhere down, and there I had to look up to the pyramid. Yeah, something like that.
Yes. And Dutch Patrick, you also had rushing feel like underground rivers. That's a perfect description. So that was fantastic to see. And then John had this, and I just put it here. I'm not quite sure how it fits, but there's a bit of a resemblance in some of the data that John was getting in this area of his session that matched with some of Claudia's data in that part of her session. So I think there's a relationship there. This I thought was interesting. John and Cody, you both have the nearly exact same carved out shape, flat on top, curved underneath. And so I just thought it was very interesting to see the nearly exact same sketch from two different people. That was nice. And then this is what I mentioned earlier with Cody, where you're saying people are looking here, but this is what is important. So maybe people are looking at the Terracotta army, but maybe the treasures are buried somewhere else where they're not digging or they're not showing the public what they're finding. Again, Cody, great sketches of the general elements of the landscape, I think. I think that was really good. You had the three mounds and then the separator, and then these two things over here that I think were coming through. John as well had the idea of linked or connected points of an area. So very good data. And then here is something that I was hoping you, the viewers, could tell me a little bit more about, because I didn't find anything on these three people, but a lot of you came through with data of three. So Claudia, you're talking about these three people by the boat, and you're saying it feels as if it's a secret operation, covert, and there are three military men. And John had Trinity, triangular, three, trifold apparatus. So there was a lot about three men in his session. And Cody, there was something about this symbol that I thought there's something here. There's this relationship between these three things, these three men. So Claudia, can you tell me a little bit about what you felt you were picking up on?
Well, this was the start of the session, and I thought three people were they had to do this thing with the mercury. That's what I later connected when I read what the target was, because I had the idea that it was not so much people who were concerned with the real thing underground. That was what was my interpretation.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. And so here we have Cody saying, well, Cody, do you want to talk about this? Because you also have the area seems to be divided up into three different groups. Can you tell me a little bit about the feel of the three different groups, maybe?
Yeah, I just thought the location was shared, like between three people or three different states or religions or something were all in the one spot. That was the best way I could kind of describe it. But
Yes.
that symbol on the one before, I've got no idea. I don't remember.
Yeah. And again, this was built 2,000 years ago, and the Chinese government is keeping a lot of what they're finding under their secret. So we don't necessarily have all the data to validate. But the fact that there was this resonance among the sessions of this idea of three people, three groups, I think that's significant. So this brings me to the, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, who?
Okay, I thought you were going to say something. Sorry.
No, sorry. I just nodded.
Okay, and so then this brings us to the Terracotta Army warriors. John Dixon reminds me of a statue. I thought that was amazing. So he got really good data for this as well. And Chris, you could smell hot, earthy coal-like, and a lot of the Terracotta warriors show signs of having been burned. So that was interesting that you picked up on that. Now, this is the tie-in between Han Purple, the purple dye, and the Terracotta Army. So I'm going to get into kind of blending the two together a little bit. We have John Dixon glazed over. So they were actually terracotta, and then they were glazed. Patrick, Dutch Patrick, you're picking up on an artist related to this. Every one of these warriors had a unique face and a unique body and unique aspects. And I think there were 8,000 in total. So 8,000 individual statues. So yeah, it would have taken, I think, quite a few artists to get this done. Jeff, you picked up on this biological structure that looked like cells, these squares with dots, the nucleus of the cell. But I think it might have been, I don't know, but because some people picked up on the warriors as being somehow alive, Chris, maybe like a robot or an android. And so I wonder if maybe you were picking up on that. John also picked up the hard enamel-like cover has a strong chemical bond. So that I think would be the glazing that they put to protect them. Now, this Han Purple, it's a really interesting pigment. And it's to this day, I don't think they're quite clear on exactly how it was made. There's still some mysteries there. But it's Chinese purple crystals linked together magnetically. And I think that's the key. And then they behave in different ways when they're exposed to magnetic fields, to different magnetic fields. And that's something unique and extremely advanced. And it's not clear how Chinese people 2,000 years ago were developing this kind of technology for this pigment. It was fantastic to see John picking up purplish undertones, that idea of manufacturing and design. Claudia, again, you had the secret military project. And I think it was that the people that were developing this for the Chinese emperor, scientists, alchemists in particular, but it's for a military type of end because they're basically using it for these warriors statues. Right. And then Chris, you have the military lab as well, and this idea of energy transformation. I think that's picking up on this idea of this sensitivity to the pigment, to magnetic fields. And I'll get more into that here if I can. Jeff, you did fantastic here. Purple light in motion. That was amazing to see. And you even took out the purple pencils, and that was so brilliant. And illuminated purple ball. That was fantastic. I was so surprised and delighted to see that in your session. And John was picking up, again, the pinkish gray undertones. And so I just wanted to say a little bit about this. So basically it's barium, copper, silicon, and oxygen. And at the quantum phase transition caused by an applied magnetic field, the crystals behave differently than they would be expected to, than other crystals would. And so there's a lot of research that's being done on this. And here's where, I don't know, but the crystal structure consists of 3 magnetically inequivalent copper bilayers. So there are these 3 layers of copper lattice, crystal lattice. I don't know if that's the 3 that kept coming through, but it's a nice synchronicity, I think.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you have these mitochondria in the cell and you have control or direct the spin. And that was so amazing because when I was reading about hand purple that was used to paint the famous Terracotta army, the ground state of the system is a quantum disordered state. And then basically you're looking at particle spin. So every dimer hosts a spin singlet. Oops, I don't know if you can see that. And I can't undo it. So you're picking up on the spin of these particles. And when you look at how they're represented in the diagram, I see a correlation with this. So I thought that was amazing. And you have here rotating waves, clockwise spin. And that's exactly what it's about. So Jeff, I think your data, we've seen this before, haven't we? Where sometimes you're getting this amazing scientific data and it comes through a medical overlay or biological overlay, but the data is still amazing. What did you think about that, Jeff?
Until now, I thought it was just complete garbage. So I don't know what to say.
I think it's incredible. And then for corroboration, here we have Chris again. So I had shown this as a description of the pyramid and the pathway and the square in front of it. But in the flip side up, the way it was in his session, he's talking about this thing rotating. And there's this like bit in the center. And it just, to me, there's a correspondence there with your image, Jeff. And Chris as well, you have these shapes and they look so much like the mitochondria that Jeff had. So I'd be interested in your input on that.
For me, so I had this sense of there was something happening with that thing over there, and there was some energy being directed. So that was using the HRPG protocol. So I had an energy 1, and that one was coming from one of those things, and it was fast and direct at some point, and it was going through those weird shaped structure in a super fast way. So yeah, that was pretty much what I felt there.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting correspondence. And then John Dixon as well had very similar shapes to both of yours. And that idea of fragmented, then attracted together, composed of different shapes. But he has your chemical molecular bonds. And so, excuse me, I think that does tie back to the fact that is how the copper moves in relation to these applied magnetic fields. So everyone, I think there was some data in most sessions that was kind of pointing to that, but these were the most striking ones. And again, this is data from John, that idea of light, out of focus, focused energy. So I would see this as the 3 copper layers, right, that we mentioned earlier, and then the magnetic fields and how they respond to that. And Cody, you have this control power symbol. They already have it. It was never lost. So for me, I'm wondering a little bit about, is that kind of secret information, but is it available elsewhere? Okay, let me just get back to that. I was just checking a notification. And then John Dixon, dielectrical testing is needed. Yes, that would be relevant when you're dealing with applying different magnetic fields. And medical equipment. Now we're getting into kind of, so there's this history science mix There's the science of the hand purple, but now I think we're getting into the mercury. And a lot of people interpreted the mercury in medical terms. And that makes sense if the emperor was taking it as an elixir of immortality, not just as rivers in the model of Shanghai. So there's brilliant data here. Medical science, declasphamine, that word I still have to look up to find out more about it, to see what he's trying to hear or listen for this in relation to these things. But I thought he has really good data here. Also, he's just picking up on ancient old priceless objects and a museum, and it's a mausoleum. So I thought that was amazing data. Here we have Dutch Patrick talking about an experiment, chemical reactions, and then as well step 1 and then step 2, and then you do this and then you do that. And I think this is the process of making the liquid mercury from the cinnabar. Alchemy-like, that was really good, like lead to gold, but this is from cinnabar to mercury. Yeah. And so, Patrick, did you want to say a few things about your data here?
Almost forgot about them. Yeah, I just wrote down what I experienced. Yeah. Nothing more special to say about it. What I want to remark is that when you practice more, it's like it's easier to get within the protocol in the flow. Just realize the importance of keep on practicing. It's very funny to see.
Yes, I think I did a year in HRVG's Looking Glass working group, and I was doing about 3 targets per week, every week. I think I only skipped a couple weeks of the year. And you need to get to that point where you're not thinking about the protocol. You're not thinking, okay, what
Exactly.
comes next, right? Yeah. And I think here John had photographic underdeveloped photo. I actually think that relates to the alchemical transition of cinnabar into mercury. And Claudia, you're also picking up on that idea of experiments. So basically, in China, their source for the liquid mercury would have been cinnabar, mercury sulfide. And a lot of people picked up on the smell of sulfur. So John Dixon mentions it here, and Dutch Patrick, you have it here, sulfur-like. And so that is the mercury sulfide. So that's fantastic data, beautiful to see. Yeah. And then Claudia, I think your liquid blue icy water, I think that's the mercury, liquid mercury. What do you think?
I think so too. Yeah, and it's dark gray, so it's not blue, but yeah. And I also checked that there are also mercury batteries. So yeah.
Yes, because you were mentioning here, it feels like a sort of new sort of battery energy storage. I thought that was really interesting for what might be going on now with mercury as a power source these days.
Yeah.
And so then we come to just the basic descriptors of the army itself, earth tones, everyone's picking up on sand, sandy smells and textures. I thought it was really interesting, John, the sand shouldn't be here because basically the Terracotta army was buried. And so that's a nice way for that data to come through. And then the Irish Patrick, you had the hollow feel, moldy, dark. There was a few people that had that moldy or moldy reference and the dark feel, the hollow feel. So I thought that was really good data. And then here I put this up, dinosaur bones discovery skeletal. I see the link there, right? Where they're digging up underground and they're finding bones, they're finding skeletons, but they're actually these statues of warriors. So I thought it was nice to see how that data is trying to come through. They have transport keeps something safe to a hidden spot. So that was great data, Claudia, for bringing all the treasures to the mausoleum. And Cody, it's like the walls are coming down around and filling up. Again, that really reminds me of John's the sand shouldn't be there, and some of the other data. So I thought that was really good. This is what the army kind of looks like now, but they would have been painted in full color. A lot of it just when it was exposed to oxygen, a lot of just deteriorated and disappeared. This was amazing to see. You have these kind of mushroom-like or structures, and then I go look in John's session, I see the exact same thing. So I thought that was amazing. And you have the AOL of Android, and so of course that makes so much sense. And so I thought it was just beautiful to see the correspondence. So, and you were mentioning earlier, Chris, you saw these polls and a lot of them, and I actually think that you were referencing the statues. What do you think about that piece of data?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this is linked. I was speaking about that just before the live stream in the offline chat. I also drew a sketch of a person where I put that it was an android or a robot. Now that I look at it, it has more Asian eye style. And the reason I put android robot was because I had the feeling that there was no emotion, that it was like static, which it's not an android, but it makes sense with the statue.
Yes. Yeah, I thought that was excellent data. And the lonely feeling you mentioned here, Claudia also picked up on it, and Irish Patrick also picked up on lonely, desolate, quiet. Claudia, you have abandoned and untouchable. And so these sat underground, covered in dirt for 2,000 years. And so I thought that was interesting that sense of loneliness kind of comes through. So that was really nice. And then people picked up, so Claudia's picking up on fighting, and a few people picked up on that idea of fighting. John Dixon, he feels desert. A lot of people said desert-like because I think it's sandy, and that's kind of the imagery that presents itself as desert-like. A lot of people picked up on the sense of organization. It has to be organized. It needs to be organized. It is organized. And then the division of elements for the different tasks, like the conference rooms, all of these things, that was a recurring pattern as well. A little bit more about the mercury in terms of the elixirs that killed the emperor. So again, John is water, liquid, energy, motion. Chris is picking up on the silverish gray, and Claudia, as we said, you had it as liquid ice, liquid blue, but I think that actually fits for the mercury.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here, Jeff, you have scientific achievement. A lot of people were mentioning the scientific aspect. And Claudia, you had all this about the health, and it's making me curious about, were you describing the alchemists that were trying to find these immortality elixirs made out of mercury for the emperor? Or were you pointing to, is there a possibility that there's something that we could use today based on that maybe would be healthy? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I got so very clearly a laboratorium, and things were tested on it, and I knew it was not nowadays. It was a longer time ago, but I don't know. To be honest,
Well,
I don't know, because plastic boxes did not exist then, but the vases, I saw some vases.
Well, the technology of the hand purple, the quantum aspects of it, the fact that it is sensitive to application of magnetic fields, it suggests that maybe things were not as primitive back then as we are told that they are, I think. And so I think some of the medical technology you're describing, we don't think that could relate to 2,000 years ago. But when we look at actually, well, maybe, because there are a lot of unexplained things about even just the fact that they made 8,000 terracotta warriors, and each of them is individual and unique.
Yeah.
How did they do that, right? So,
and I want to add one thing. I read somewhere that the purple has something to do with the glass making. The way how it's a byproduct of glass making. I
Oh.
read somewhere, and then they discovered the purple. So I had a lot of glass. So
Yes.
maybe that had to do with it. I don't know.
That's a really great finding. Definitely. Yeah. I'll have to read more about that. That's interesting. And then Dutch Patrick, did you want to talk a little bit about this?
Let me see.
And you have knowledge of all three is the whole. Again, the three, right? So that's why I
Yeah.
put this on the page.
Yeah, I had the experience about manuscripts as well. I'm not sure.
So I'm wondering if you have these three pieces of the puzzles that are coming together, and we were talking about how in the hand purple you have these different layers, and you have 3 layers of copper, and then when they're applied to changing magnetic fields, they kind of behave differently. And I'm wondering if that's the jigsaw puzzle, is that you have to have these precise magnetic fields, and then these 3 crystal layers change their shape, change their properties. I wonder if it's maybe a metaphor of something that's very technical and very complex, and if you're just kind of describing it in this way, that maybe helps to make sense of it. You have the Knights of the Round Table feel. The alchemists would have been kind of like the that higher tier of special men in the kingdom would be the alchemists, right, at court under the emperor.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. And then Claudia, I have this up because, again, you're talking about maybe the uses of the elixirs that they were trying to develop for the emperor, and just that idea of medicine and curing conditions. And it's interesting because you said here, I have the feeling that the issue indeed has been used already for the help for mankind. And I'll show this, but Chris, in your medical session, you also had this idea of like there's something that's being developed and it could be the cure for mankind. So I thought that was really nice little correlation with Claudia's wording.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
And then here we have Jeff and Claudia, I think very similar sketches where you have the tables and you have these things going on and the light, the pyramidal shape, and Claudia has the beakers and the pyramidal shapes. And this idea of Jeff has the frozen storage and Claudia has the cooling for storage. Is amazing to see. So you can see that there are differences in the interpretation, but the underlying data, I think this is a great pattern. If you guys want to say something about it, you can.
Maybe it's nowadays that they are doing something there what we do not know. Maybe they found something because they are testing the mercury, right?
Yes.
And maybe it has something to do with that. Because
I think that makes sense, actually. Yes. Yeah, because there are labs that are working with the hand purple to try to probe its quantum properties. And Jeff, I didn't think about the nice correlation between the two sketches.
So in terms of my picture, one of the things, so I drew 2 desks in a lab-based area, and one of the notes I made on there that was what just stood out was that there was no computer on the desk. That said to me this is not a modern lab. This is not modern times.
Okay.
I also mentioned that it was before any computer. Yeah.
So would this be the alchemist, like working on and also the construction of the statues and all that stuff, like the artisans and things? You think back then?
Yeah, could be.
I think so. I definitely see that, especially because if we look at Jeff's sketch, he has the purple here, and I think I think that would make sense.
Yeah, I said things were investigated in a time era before any computer or digital measure devices.
And I think I have it somewhere that I don't. Maybe I don't have it yet. Maybe it's on my next slide. Yeah, there it is.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Calculations by hand.
for something liquid. So I think this probably did have to do with the liquid mercury and the hand purple and just all these kinds of things mixed up. So yeah, Jeff, I think putting the no computer on the desk, that's significant, that picking that up and being able to extrapolate from that maybe this is not modern today. Yeah, so that was really good. And then here we have the boreholes. So you can see here, there's the upper left, we have an image with all these circles, and this is showing all the boreholes over the site and the level of mercury contamination that they found in the soil. And so I think, Michael, you have the holes, and Jeff, you had this kind of shape. I think you're pointing to, and that brings us back to Chris and Jeff's that I had shown earlier, that I said those squares with all the little holes or all the little marks in them. I think that's what you guys were picking up on.
Yeah.
And then Cody, you were picking up on this gold cup, and I was quite curious about this. And when I saw that the Emperor was drinking all these liquid mercury immortality elixirs, I wonder if there was something along these lines, if he had some kind of a bejeweled cup, and that would have been buried with him in the tomb. John Dixon had a vase that had kind of floral patterns. I think he was drawing the underlying data, I think, is the same. So the pattern is the same. And what I thought was so funny was that I was looking, you have this cup and it's angled, it's not straight up and down, and then I come across in Jeff's session that there's something held in a cup at an angle, and so that was just kind of very amusing little data pieces. The idea that it was not real that came through for you, Cody, I think it's that idea of the Emperor was being told by his alchemists, oh, drink this and it's going to cure everything, and it wasn't. It was just liquid mercury and he died from it. So I think that idea of the myth aspect to it, that's how I would tie it in. And then the gold cup, Irish Patrick, you were also seeing the objects of gold, bright gold. So I thought that was good data as well. Everyone drew this, and I don't have feedback for it. But everyone drew, here we have Michael and Jeff drawing these crossed wires, the splintering, high energy. And then everyone's also drawing kind of this motion, these crisscrosses. I'm not sure what to make of it. If you guys have any ideas.
One thing that, and I'm not saying that's what this is, but I'm wondering if it makes me think a little bit of like if you're trying to lay out the structure for a big area and trying to map it so that you get the right precision of the angles and stuff when you try to actually make the pathways or the carvings or whatever. The one in the upper right makes me think of like stuff hanging off to kind of measure these things over long distances. I'm not saying it's what it is. Just when I see that immediately, I kind of think about construction on a large scale.
Plumb line.
Probably measuring equipment or something. I don't know.
That makes so much sense. Yes. Thank you, David. The plumb lines, to see if they're level, they suspend a piece of lead, right? From a, I don't know, some kind of a construct.
Yeah, that's what they do. That's what they do in excavations, mapping it, squaring it, and then dig it out.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad. Okay. I'm glad you guys solved that for me, because I was like, I'm missing something here. Maybe it was too late after bedtime for me. And then I thought John Dixon did a great job here of putting it together as well. There's something pumping energy, water, liquid through tube-like structures. I actually think for him here, it seems to me, just from the data that was around this, that I think he's looking at the distillation process of you're taking the cinnabar, you're extracting the powdered mercury, and then you have to liquefy it. And so I think that he's kind of describing one of the techniques that they were using to do that here as well. And then, okay, so this kind of boat-shaped object comes through in quite a few sessions. And then because it's related to military, it goes through different interpretations and analytical overlay, aircraft or railgun kind of thing. But I think these layers of warriors that were in the ground in the tomb, I think it's kind of related to that. But if you have, if you come across data that suggests something different, I would love to see it. That would be really interesting. We could share it with the group. And then just a few items that I thought were kind of cute and amusing. Jeff, you had the clothes make the man and something about formality. And then Irish Patrick, you had the formal feel to some individuals. I think, you know, every warrior has the full outfit on, the full warrior dress. And so I wondered if that was what that was. And a lot of you mentioned cold. And Irish Patrick had the AOL of Antarctica, whereas for Dutch Patrick, it came through as Alaska. So it was interesting to see. I wasn't the cold storage that we had up here for the lab. I think that's what people were picking up on. I wonder. So that was some of the interesting data correlations. And then John Dixon had this key-like thing and this circular object, and it wasn't clear what it is, but I actually think he might have been describing the physical description of some of these elements and just needed to change the orientation for some of his data. And then these are just, that's it. So let me back. So what did you guys think?
Not bad.
Well, thank you for making this.
Yeah, thank you for the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit more rushed. I was sick, so it was a little bit more last minute than I usually like to do them. But I feel as though I was still able to cover the data and the correlations. What do you guys think about the correlations in your data?
Yeah, amazing. I thought that the second, the retask that I had this totally wrong, but then it's very nice to see that others picked up on the same. It's really amazing. Because I already wrote, I was totally off my target.
That's how I feel in all my sessions. So don't feel too bad about that. But yeah, I thought personally, looking at this as a collection of information, it's quite fascinating and I think quite powerful. You guys should be proud of that work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I would take this as the starting point for a project, right? Like if I was wanting to research more about these using remote viewing, I think something like this is an amazing start point for a project because now you have things to investigate. Tell me more about this lab that has no computers in it, but they seem to be doing high-tech stuff. Tell me more about this mercury, this liquid blue. Cody, your cup. What did you think about that in terms of just the broader data?
Yeah, maybe it was a bit symbolic. I had the AOL of the cup from Indiana Jones that gives you immortal life, cup of Christ. So that's kind of symbolic to what he was trying to do. I'd say he drank it out of a cup.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And were you surprised by any of the correlations between your data and other people's data?
Yeah, it's always surprising. It's good to see. Makes me feel better about mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chris, I'll let you talk a little bit, but while you're talking, I might also share because you had the medical session. So Chris had me a medical session. He was like, I don't know if this is off or on. And at the time I was really sick and I was like, I think, and I hadn't started looking into, like, I knew the mercury connection for the rivers and in the model, but I didn't know that he was drinking the mercury for immortality. I hadn't come across that yet. And so when I saw Chris's session with the medical stuff, I said, I think maybe you're just remote viewing me right now. And so I kind of put that session a little bit to the side, but I'm going to share some of it now. And Chris, if you want to talk about it a little bit, because I think it was good. You had good data. And did you see the correspondences with Claudia's?
Yeah. And related to you, what is funny, like I told you, is that normally I just go with the target number. But for that one, I closed my eyes at the beginning of my session and I tried to put the intention not to see the target, but to see what Sasha wants me to see for the target. So it's funny that on that one, you found some correlation with you personally. That was pretty interesting.
That was fantastic. And that's the power of intent. And that's what I wanted to say. You know, when I was working the targets for HRVG Looking Glass, you know, when you're doing 3 targets a week and you're not getting feedback for 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes it was longer than 3 weeks. we didn't really get displacement. I had displacement once when I was doing a target for another group and I switched them with my intent somehow. And I got an amazing session on the Grand Canyon and all this Egyptian stuff. And I could see the Smithsonian going in there. But I submitted it to the wrong person because my intent just messed it up. So all this great data and it's useless because it was under the wrong TRN. And one of the things, Chris, that we mentioned, I have had on occasion where I write the wrong numbers or the wrong letters in my TRN, just because we were doing so much remote viewing at that time under Looking Glass. It never made a difference. I had great data, regardless of if it was a 6 and I wrote a 9, or if it was a J and I wrote an L. It didn't make any difference in my data, I noticed. And I have, at least on one occasion, yeah, I wrote the completely wrong TRN, but my intent was correct. And my data was excellent for that session, even though I had the wrong TRN for that one that I did submit to Looking Glass, and it was great data. So the TRN it's a marker, but it's your intent that does the work. People think, we're going to be talking about displacement in a second, but people think the tasker puts a label on a drawer in the ether, in the data stream, and then the data is in that drawer, and then you take that label and you go to the drawer and you open the drawer and get that. But that's not how it works. Because you don't have to have the TRN, you don't have to have the correct TRN, you don't have to have any TRN at all. You can still access the data. You can access it through the viewer or the tasker. You can access it within yourself. You can access it in the data stream. There's all these different kind of ways of accessing it. And so I think it was nice that came up, Chris, this week, so that we could talk about that. I'm going to share your session very quickly. Do you want to talk about it a little bit and just some of the obvious elements?
Yeah, I don't remember it really.
Okay, so I think this is the pyramid. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
For the pyramid. You know, this visit, your first visit, I saw something like this in someone else's session, but I couldn't remember whose it was. Again, you have the square here. This shape, animal shape, that reminds me of the mitochondria in Jeff's session. And yeah, and I think, and John Dixon's work. Here you have the pyramid as well, the triangular shape.
The different sticks again.
Yes, yeah, the rows of warriors. And it's funny that you have AOL knives, because they all have swords. So I thought that was really, really nice, AOL. Again, you have the triangular, the entrance to the underground tomb. So that was good. The 3 pyramids. Again, the element of 3 just keeps coming up in all your sessions. So that even this, you have 3 arrows for the direction, the elastic band. I'm interpreting that to be the magnetic fields, application of the magnetic fields.
That was a weird one. It was like something powered going frontward, but really with the feeling of like an elastic band. So mechanic, not electrical.
So I think that's the effect of the magnetic field on the crystal lattice, right?
Yeah, or these are the booby traps.
Or they could be the booby traps, right?
That could be it.
Yeah. And so then you had the lab tests, you had, you know, you started falling into the medical, excuse me, and then the liquids, that's there, you have the liquid mercury, the helmet, the glasses, that also came up in other people's sessions, the protective gear, in the science data, medical stuff. Disease, excuse me, disease cured with vibrations. And so I think it's that idea of like alternative medicine, which the alchemists would have been doing, right? It's alternative medicine. And then here you did a concept map.
Around the medical.
Yeah. And then around the discovery as well. And see, you have a better world, hope for the future. So this mirrors some of the wording in Claudia's description. So I thought that was nice. This kind of thing that relates to the cup, perhaps. And then you had your summary. The target is dangerous if you're not careful with it. So that's the mercury, right? If you're exposed to the vapors, then it poisons you. So, and there seems to be some liquid or some substance of some type that is sliding. That was amazing data. So I thought that was really worth just bringing up, because I didn't include it in my
That's
presentation.
true. Mercury, liquid mercury, when you watch it, it looks like it's sliding instead of flowing.
That's right. Yeah, and so I thought you had great data in that session as well, and I wanted to thank you for submitting that as well. I'm sorry, I apologize for not having included it. I just realized this
No
morning
problem.
I had kind of put it aside, and then I realized, oh no, that I have to bring that back in, because it wasn't just a bit of displacement. So did you want to talk a little bit about displacement, or have you guys had a lot of experiences with displacement? And I'm asking in relation to the 2 targets that were worth this week. Oh no, it's not time to talk about displacement. It's time for Jeff to give us his feedback on his target. I apologize, Jeff. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I'll start by apologizing. I think my tasking was awful, but you did a great job nonetheless. And we'll explain this as we go through. If I can.
And it's always a little bit trying to figure out how to share. It's a little bit tricky because we're using StreamYard instead of Zoom. So while Jeff is figuring that out, I just want to say again, you guys did such an excellent job on the mausoleum, the tomb, and the warriors. I'm so amazed and impressed by your work. It was really, really good. Yeah. The precision, the depth of the details, the relevance, the sheer volume of data. It was really, really wonderful. And I love that we're seeing these group correspondences start to pick up, that group coherence. I think that's good.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say that is interesting to me when I look at this from an analysis perspective, I've not looked at every remote viewing session out there in terms of what groups do, but the fact that 2 of you got, as an example, the exact same phrase, like some of the, it's one thing to have sort of in the ballpark, sort of triangle, and this person gets sort of a triangle. When you get like the precision level that is to that level of detail, because Sasha and I have seen this in other instances in our own work in working with groups, and it's just a tiny piece of data, but you see it's like an exact match with the other person, and it's to me, it's really important to show the capability of what remote viewing is actually, possible with the tool itself. Because in a general sense, I think people look at it more as clusters of information, generalities. You can clearly see the comparisons. That's not a problem, right? But when you actually see that level of precision, it's like, oh, if you can do that once, you can do it again. Let's figure out how to do that again, right? That's where my mind goes with this. So I'm just pointing that out because I think it's a very important piece of information that was shared today that I think most people kind of look at, oh, that's cool, and just kind of like out of their head. But I'm like, no. That's really quite amazing, and we should look at how we can exploit that.
Yes, I agree. What do you guys think? Especially the ones that did have those, Claudia and Jeff, Claudia and Chris, who both had the better world, this miracle cure from the mercury, and then hidden in plain sight. I think that was Cody and Jeff as well, who both had in brackets hidden in plain sight. That was so amazing to see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always amazing to see that, because I mean, if you don't believe, and I don't like to use the word believe in remote viewing, I mean, from a statistical perspective, it's really a small chance that in a group of 5-6 people, you would have the same stuff. It would just be random with a whole bunch of random stuff.
Yeah, I agree. That's right. Exactly. the fact that there's so much correspondence among the work does suggest that there's really something to this for people who are more skeptical. Yeah. Jeff, how are you doing with the screen sharing?
My file's too big. So
Okay.
one second.
I was going to make a joke, but then I think I probably won't.
Yeah.
Don't want to bring the topic of displacement too early, but I had a displacement in the live streams. You had one of the targets that was the MH370 plane, and the live stream before that, I sent you a session where I stopped because I was like, the AOL of the plane MH370 is too big, so I'm gonna stop because it's becoming. I mean, I cannot get rid of the AOL. So I thought that was a funny potential displacement.
Yes. Displacements and synchronicities, right? Sometimes it's displacement, sometimes it's synchronicity. But, you know, David and I were talking about this, so displacement and some of the issues with it. Did you want to say a few things about it now then, David, while Jeff is getting his file sorted?
Yeah, so I guess we can go ahead and just kind of cover that topic now. So I'm going to give my kind of perspective on this, my opinions and my experiences essentially. So yeah, I've seen personally displacement, and again, it's all this stuff. Anything we talk about, my perspective is multi-layered. So you can look, I can talk about it this layer, but there's all this other kind of perspectives that are not being considered when I talk about this piece of information. And so Sasha will comment on the intent portion of it, but for me, as an example, 2 or 3 targets are open. I'm not getting feedback. So I do target 1, no feedback. I start to collect data on target 2. Still no feedback in target 1, and I don't get any feedback on it when I complete target 2. And then the same thing for a third target, and then I get all the feedback on a singular day. Now, and so then what I see potentially is I could have data from target 2 in target 1. And it's like, well, how's that possible? The target, you haven't even done target 2. That's in the future. It's right. Well, the problem is that, in my opinion, when we're pulling data from that part of ourself that has access to that part doesn't access time linearly. It is a different mechanism. It doesn't have an issue or just a limitation. The part of us that's here has a limitation with time. That part of ourselves does not. So when we pull the data from target 2 into data 1, it's not a big deal for it because it's all that stuff is sort of easily accessible. But to us, it's just like, wow, it's really weird. It doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. Like that couldn't happen. But it does. I've seen it. So displacement for me is a scenario where you can get the fragments of sessions spread across, 1 into 2, 2 into 1, all that kind of stuff, right? And one of the explanations is, when you get feedback, that closes the loop, and then you don't necessarily see that information bleeding into, let's say, after feedback of those 3 targets. You don't necessarily see that data bleeding into the target here in this, into the future, right? And the thing is like, oh, you close the loop, it's all self-contained, and now it's corrected, right? That's one explanation as to what's happening. In terms of fixing it, what I've been told and have seen personally is that over a period of time, that corrects itself. That I can do now after years of doing this stuff, I can do multiple targets. I don't see that effect. And it's because, they'll say things like, well, you just correct in your mind. You could say that maybe it's neural pathways are kind of building up, whatever different explanations you want to make as to why that happens. Now, I'm going to give you a different perspective as to why this might be happening and how you can think about it in terms of, as a beginner, if you're suffering from this and you don't want to spend the 6 months with the experience part. Sasha will give an indication about intention being part of the solution, which I believe is absolutely correct. But I'm going to give you a different kind of perspective. My perspective is that the reason this happens is that so I do the first target, right? And as a beginner, like my experience with remote viewing now is somewhat different than a beginner. I still get excited about a target. I still want to know the results, right? That hasn't necessarily exactly changed. But in the beginning, that level of anxiety or emotion or desire is so powerful in the beginning because you're like, is this real? Did I do it? Did I mess up? Like all this kind of stuff, right? Now as an advanced viewer, I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, like that's gone from like this level down to like this level, because the experience of being repeatedly kind of beaten to death with all these targets over many years, you're just like, I've seen this, it's a real thing, you can calm down, it's not a big deal, right? So this is where I'm at now. But in the beginning, it's like, oh, did I get the target? Did I get the target? So I think part of the reason why this displacement effect occurs is because part of me is in the beginning was anxious to understand, did I get it? So there's this, even if on the forward part of me, the human part of me is like, I'm not thinking about the target. It's like, yeah, but some part of you, the subconscious or whatever, it is back there pinging through a point of anxiety. You're pinging that data, and that data is still there. So then if you catch it you're in the state for session 1 at some point, and you're pinging, and you get this cross kind of thing happening, right? You're in the right state to pull the data from any of these targets. But the anxiety component is a piece that's driving sort of that undesirable bleed through into this session work. So if that's true, because I usually like to test all this stuff to speak from experience. That's where I'm an engineer. It's like, okay, I got a theory. Did I test this? No, I haven't necessarily tested this, but I would suggest that it probably will work because it's based on logic and whatnot. Is number one, just being aware that this might actually be happening, I believe will start to drop the displacement a bit, because now part of yourself is internally is going to start to combat that inner dialogue that you're not necessarily, like awareness really is what I'm trying to say, can self-correct a lot of things to a certain degree. Awareness is really powerful. So I'm saying awareness of this may correct to a degree this particular issue for a beginner if they hear this information. I can't prove that. That's my suspicion. The second part is, if you look at any kind of tool that deals with PTSD or anxiety, so this could be breathing techniques, it could be there's a bunch of options out there, but it's like, if you're mindful when you're doing your session work and you realize like you're doing session 1 and you complete it, and then from that point you have to be mindful. This is the part that's really hard to do, but you're mindful for that period of time, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, or whatever. Every time you think about, oh, did I get that feedback on target 2 yet? Or I can't wait to get the feedback on target 2. This is like 3 days later. You still haven't gotten feedback. The second you have that thought, you should probably go through some kind of process to detach from it. That can be intention, that can be affirmations, that can be using sort of breathing techniques to kind of bring your emotional level and your detach from it. Any process, meditation, whatever, that you could use to basically detach from that desire. I believe if you're kind of consistent with that, I suspect what you'll find as a beginner is more rapid, very rapidly within a few weeks of doing multiple targets, you'll probably find displacement just goes away. That's my guess. Now, Sasha can speak about the intent portion.
Yeah, because I think what David is saying is correct, that even without paying attention to it, if you're doing enough remote viewing, it self-corrects to a certain extent. And I think it is what he's saying is that you lose that attachment to the feedback. You do your session and then you're done and you move to your next session, and you're not still very emotionally attached to that first one because you're done, it's closed, and you're not, the loop doesn't close when the feedback comes. The loop closes when you finish that session, consider it done. I think that's the thing. Don't make the loop ending the feedback event. And I think also that will help you have less noise, because if you're getting feedback for different targets on the same day, or in a live stream like this one, where we're going to give feedback for 2 different targets, if you don't want to get noise from the other target in your session, don't make this the end of your loop. Don't remote view the feedback. In your mind, with your intent, consider it, I'm done my session, I submitted it to Sasha, I sent the email off, now that's closed, that's the end. I think that should help you see better results to reduce displacement and reduce noise. And there was another thing that I was going to say, but I can't quite remember. I lost it.
Intent.
That it's your intent that drives it, right? And so, but also closing sessions. When I consider my sessions closed, if I'm doing 2 sessions for a target and I'm doing my second session, I'm like, it's closed, it's done. And then I do a retask maybe, And then when I'm done my retask, that's done and it's closed in my mind, in my intention, in my belief. You really have to feel it. Then the data from that, even if I'm super interested and I'm still thinking about it, I find it won't creep into my future sessions. The problem with that is, and this I think is specific to some remote viewing methods that have you end or close or break when you need to take a pause, and then you have to kind of like reconnect with your ideogram, or you have to reopen the session. I think that can cause problems, because then for retasking, or when you want to go back and get more data on a session, you've closed it. And so that can maybe make it harder to get that data. So it's this idea of don't close your session until you're done collecting data for that project. And so we're doing two things. We're saying, on the one hand, don't close it, keep it open. But you also want to be able to work other targets that week and not have that displacement. So partly just by practicing remote viewing multiple targets at the same time before getting feedback, you strengthen your intent, you strengthen your lines to the different targets so that you don't have as much bleed through. So a lot of that is just being, and what David was saying, once you're aware of these things, just by being aware of it, it gets better, because there's something in your mind that's like, oh yeah, okay, I have to tighten that up, clean that line to the signal a little bit. Jeff? Yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, just a quick thought on that is to say that, as an example, logically on real life, if somebody's blind to something that they have no idea that they're doing as a behavioral trait, right, and you point it out to them, a lot of times they'll self-correct that simply because they're completely ignorant of it, right? And the same process, in my opinion, works internally with these kinds of situations. So it's just sort of a extra thought. That's all. Yeah, let's take it away, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. And after Jeff does his presentation, but I did want to cover people who are maybe saying, "Oh, don't share your work in public." We'll talk about that at the end for a few minutes. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, processing. So I have a PowerPoint file here that had 2 videos in it that were huge, and so that it didn't like that. Okay, so how do I actually make this bigger now? Does that work?
Yes, there we go. We have it on screen.
Okay. All right. I love tea. I've loved tea forever. I have some very weird exotic teas. I've taken a lot of tea classes, and in 2018, I went to China and did a little bit of a tea tour at a couple different places. So have a lot of interest in. And I also have a really hard time pronouncing things. So I like this. I really like this particular type of oolong tea from a specific area of China, and I can't pronounce it. But it often goes by the name of Monkey King or something like that. There's usually monkey in the title somewhere. And the story of this tea was that it got the name monkey because monks would actually train monkeys to go up and pick the highest leaves up in the mountains that people couldn't reach, and they wanted those leaves that were up high because they were closest to heaven and they had the most spiritual power. So this is a story that I had heard and I just fell in love with. And when I was in China in 2018, I had somebody confirm to me that yes, this really did occur. But it's a very controversial story. And a lot of people say it's just complete mythology and it never really happened. And there's actually kind of a linear path as to where the story might have originated. So I wanted to task this in some way, shape, or form. And I just decided to task it as if it were true. And nobody came back with anything monkey related, which I think tells me this is much more a story and it wasn't true. But you came back with lots of great tea data, and you came back with what's probably the most likely story as to how this legend began. So let's go through the data. How do I go forward? Okay. not going to try and pronounce that name. It's not like it sounds, but mountain range in a specific area of China. Very weird tall mountains, and this is where this particular type of tea is grown. And this is also probably somehow how the legend got created, because there are a lot of tea bushes that are difficult to get to. And Michael and Chris both drew something like this picture that was in the tasking. Some very tall peaks that don't even look like they would be natural, and the more normal mountains behind them. So what people did come up with, much more so than tea, were things that revolved around ships, and what probably comes back to Lord Macartney's expedition of 1792. This was an English expedition to basically improve trade relations with China. And it didn't go well. And this was kind of a turning point in history, and it probably led to the Opium Wars, and it was really a key point in time. The English people were really getting addicted to tea, and so England wanted more access to the tea from China. So they sent 600 people on a very large ship called the Lion. It was a warship that had 62 guns. It was the largest one in existence at that point in time, and went there to improve trade relations. They had a whole series of gifts, not so much even gifts, but things that they intended to impress the Chinese with. There were textiles, there was different types of china, pottery type things. There were steam machines, clocks, guns, a planetarium, a hot air balloon, and different types of singers and dancers. They were going to basically put on a show and wow the Chinese. And some people have since described it as it was a traveling world's fair. And the term that has been used several times in terms of researching this was the circus was in town. So some relation to circus kept coming up. And that came up in a couple people's sessions. So basically the emperor received these people, sort of said thank you, and essentially said all the stuff that you've provided was suitable entertainment for children. Was very dismissive of the whole exposition. But in and of that, so Lord Macartney had a valet, is what was his title. So basically assistant, and Anesis Anderson, am I saying that right? Probably, I think so. So he actually wrote several books based upon this journey to China. And he was basically documenting what typical everyday life was like in China. So he didn't really care so much about the political situation and the whole improving trade thing. He wanted to get to know the Chinese people. And in talking to tea merchants who were in Canton, is where this actually was, Guizhou now, basically got stories from the tea merchants that this one particular type of tea was picked by monkeys. And part of the analysis of the story goes is they were basically making fun of, hey, this guy from England will believe anything that we tell him. Let's see how wild of a story we can make and get him to believe it. But he basically put this in one of his books, and his accounts of China were some of the first that most Englishmen had ever heard. And it's kind of like your first kiss. The first thing you hear about an area, it really creates a strong belief because you don't have anything else to compare it to. So the idea of monkeys picking tea became a very common concept. And even still today, there are a lot of tea brands of this particular type of oolong that have monkey in the title in some way, shape, or form. Okay. I'm going to try and show a video here before I go on to the next session. Let's see if this is going to work.
I wish you luck.
You have not had success before?
No, but you might have to unpresent and then represent with the different screens selected. There we go.
Okay, so this is an alternate story of this tea. Those are ducks quacking.
Many of you have probably heard of the origin story of Tie Guanyin, but in case you haven't, I'll give you a quick recap. A farmer was walking past a temple of Guanyin. Guanyin is the god or goddess of compassion and mercy, and saw that the temple was falling apart and needed some love and attention. And so the farmer cleaned the temple, renovated it, and as a present, as a gift, Guanyin came into his dream and instructed him where he could find a very special tea plant. Well, we are staying at the farmhouse of a direct descendant of Wei Yin, 9 generations down. And I had this amazing opportunity to talk to him about this story. And he says that the family knowledge is that Guanyin did in fact come into the dream of Wei Yin around 300 years ago, but he didn't renovate any temple. That part of the story is not true, but Guanyin came into his dream and instructed him of where he could find this special tea plant. A great story. Follow me. Okay, Celine, you need to get a good shot here. This tea plant, nestled on the ledge here, is supposedly the original Mother Tie Guanyin plant that Wei Yin discovered nearly 300 years ago. The date is supposedly 1723. Now, I don't know how true this story is, but supposedly that tea plant over there is the one that was first discovered, and from this mother tea plant, all other Guanyin varieties, all other Guanyin cultivars were created.
Okay. So that's the story. There's lots of stories in China. At this point in time, based upon this feedback, these sessions, I'm going to guess that the monkey story probably wasn't true, but there's lots of stories, and I'm not convinced that the other story was true. But
let's see the data.
So doesn't this look like that site of the first tea bush? So essentially an energy source. So that being the tea bush here, there's mountains, there's the home, and there was also, it didn't actually make it onto your site sketch, but there was actually water and a river that came through here. So it's as though somebody drew that video and that tea bush.
And is this John Kelly's work?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So John Kelly's not with us today. He couldn't make it today, but yeah.
Okay. So there's just interesting thing with number 1 that came out of this data. Okay. The goddess of compassion and mercy. There's lots of different representations of her. This is what Cody drew. Cody drew a lot of things revolving around a ship, and this was made out of wood, leaning forward, like it might have been sort of the what's the tip end, the front end of a ship called? So that's what his representation might have looked like, but it seems like it could very well have been the goddess of compassion. All right, onward. Okay, I'm going to do one more video before we do that. But we're going to talk about the process of making tea, which several people had some amazing, what used to be very secretive aspects of tea manufacture in their sessions. One more video.
So remote viewing is able to access top secret data. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a problem. Let's not talk about that.
It was top secret at one point in time, not so much anymore. But the Chinese did keep this from the English as long as they possibly could. This was one of their big secrets. And it's basically the process of rolling. Those are tea leaves.
Here the tea is rolled vigorously to break the cell membrane, which releases oils, which will result in a more enhanced flavor when the tea is brewed.
Okay, so that rotary motion injures the tea leaves in a very specific way, and it's actually usually done several times throughout the tea making process. And essentially how it's been described is you're releasing a little bit of water and sugars from the tea leaves, and it allows a little bit of fermentation of the leaves to occur, but not completely. And then you do it again, and it's a little bit more fermentation. And it's what develops the specific flavors in this tea. When I first saw Michael's drawing here, it's like, yep, I know what that is. So it used to be done by hand, but it was done on metal discs, very much like was in that picture. That was an automated video from today, but that same process of having basically metal ribs that you're, in a sense, dragging the tea across. And it was a very specialized technique. You want to damage the leaves just a little bit, but not too much. And they've developed mechanical processes to simulate it, but there's still a fondness for the people who do it all by hand. But there are several rotary mechanisms and hold on. Do you see the slide thing in front of you?
Yes. Yeah, we're
Yep.
seeing the slides.
Okay.
Do you want us to see something different, or?
No, that's okay. I'm not sure whose work this was, because I'm seeing the little slide that's over their name.
Oh, Chris is the center.
Okay, Chris. Yes. Okay. So Chris also drew the circular motion. Target seems to involve some sort of liquid movement, basically removing a little bit of liquid from the tea and releasing it in a slow manner. And it's measured and seems to be rotational in a linear motion. It's energetic and valuable. The activity is slow, peaceful, and
Tranquil.
So I basically took a tea class where we all did this by hand, and tranquil was one of the words that the instructor kept using over and over again. You need to respect the tea. You need to treat it gently. You need to, in a sense, baby the tea. Yes, you're breaking it apart, but you need to do it in the most gentle fashion you can. And then Claudia added in smell of fresh grasses, smell of fresh flowers. So this tea has a very floral aroma in addition to a green aroma.
Yeah, that's great data, Chris, and everybody else that contributed as well. The coherency of that, to me, this is the power of remote viewing when you get good viewers, and I look for the coherency, right? So that is really strong coherency to the target. It's amazing.
So this is a cartoon of Lord McCartney's meeting with Guilan, who was the emperor at the time. And later it was described as a circus, and basically that it just made the English look like fools. They brought all these things that the Chinese interpreted as toys. So I think this is actually Claudia here. Suspicion, tension, a moment in time. So the picture is a moment in time, And there was a lot of tension between the Chinese and the English after this. And Michael says, nostalgic like an old Polaroid. Well, it's not like an old Polaroid, but it's definitely an old Chinese style picture. A mechanism of exploitation. Basically, the English were trying to get as much as they could out of the Chinese and get special rights that other countries didn't have with regard to trading. And so looking at the sky is the comment on this in this little box. There was a planetarium that was one of the things. I don't know what a planetarium that you would carry on a ship would actually look like, but looking at the sky being there, and then a group of people in a coliseum like a circus. So Michael actually mentioned the word circus.
Yeah, that's also really good data from both of you. It's amazing.
And Cody went on and on about a boat and the swaying motion and how it was a boat for a specific purpose. He also used the word pirate several times. So it was definitely a ship of war and battle, but it was also shipping things. It was bringing things to China, and it had the intent of bringing things back. It was not intended for that purpose all along. It was more to impress and be a act of war, but it was also bringing things. It was transporting people. It was transporting goods to and from China. Claudia had something that was also sort of interesting to me. She drew this 12-year-old girl, and I thought it was very interesting that she mentioned 12 years old, because one of the other things about this whole mission, they had only one person who could speak both English and Chinese and Mandarin. And he was later called Sir George Staunton, but George Staunton was only 12 years old, and he knew Chinese. He had learned it from a priest that had been passing through. So the only person that they brought to interpret directly from English to Chinese was this 12-year-old boy who was not very politically correct, I guess. He offended the Chinese, and the Chinese were just generally offended that they came all this way, and their only interpretation was this 12-year-old boy. So it's a key part of that story, and I'm wondering, boy to girl, if that in some way, shape, or form might have been a representation of him. Most of the pictures of him later in life, he does have long curly locks, like most English gentlemen would have, like a Sir would. So I'm wondering if there's some connection there.
It's a nice data point. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the one thing that really floored me. So I'm wearing this pendant right now. So this pendant was given to me on this 2018 trip to China. And it was given to me right before this tea tasting that I went to, where I heard the story that, monkeys really did pick tea.
Wow.
And there was this Buddhist monk who basically was trying to get donations, and he would give people things and say, basically after the fact, you can give me a donation if you'd like. And so I got this Buddhist pendant, and if you look at it in really bright light, it's very dark in color, but if you look at it in really, really bright light, it does have a reddish tinge around the outside when light shines through it. So this pendant with the red around the outside had been in a drawer for years until probably about 6 months ago. So Lan Vo is a psychic who people associated with HRVG. She's been mentioned several times. Dick Allgaier talks about her from time to time. I had a reading with Lan Vo, which was very bizarre in a lot of ways. So she told me so much about my family. Nothing that was a big revelation in any way, shape, or form, but she knew details of days in my life that there's no way anybody could possibly know. So just small little inconsequential details. One of the things that she told me during the session was, you went to China and you got a Buddha and you put it away. You need to take that out and you need to put that in your living room. So when I was tasking this, it was literally sitting right in front of me.
Interesting.
Why did she tell me to have it out? And this was definitely when I was tasking this was definitely part of something that entered my consciousness because of the connection to the monkey story. So that Cody drew this in some sort of representation. How does this stuff work? I don't understand it. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, good job, Cody. That's awesome.
Okay. This is the part I like most about all this, is my retasking. Oops. Okay. Hold on. So here was my retasking. The subject of monkey pick tea is controversial. Is it legend or is it real? The viewer will go to the Museum of Truth. So the Museum of Truth is a construction of my own mind, and it's basically someplace you can go and remote view history, but it will be the true history. So it's just a complete construct of my mind, but that's what I tasked. So go there and view the monkey pick tea exhibit and report the true origin and propagation of the monkey pick tea story. And so 2 people did the retasking. First was Claudia, and she basically had all data that came back around a rock concert, around Elvis, basically a performance. So what this says to me is the whole monkey pick tea story is just a story. It's a performance. It was something that was used to sell tea, to make fun of the English. It wasn't based in reality. It was a performance, and Claudia had no monkeys in her session whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's a fair interpretation. Definitely the performance aspect. Yep, I think that's great.
Yeah, or I saw the name McCartney and then I thought of Paul McCartney because I thought this is a totally crap, but now when
That's
I hear
awesome.
you, yeah.
That's a definite connection too.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, Cody, also no monkeys, viewed it as a nautical incident and an incident that did not go well, or a nautical accident or disaster. And the whole McCartney mission was a disaster. It had 100% the opposite effect that it was supposed to. It really damaged relations between England and China as opposed to making them better. So what Cody is saying to me is the monkey story arose out of the McCartney mission. His what's his
I think that is also a valid interpretation. Yeah.
His valet basically got fed the story at the time and took it back to the English world.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and because that ship was a military ship, you can see the connection
Yeah.
to the analogy here.
That the goal of the ship was ended up in failure.
So how can I task things better in the future?
Can you show your tasking on screen?
Maybe these remote viewers are pretty brilliant. Maybe you should task them that question.
So I basically took the monkey aspect as truth and tasked it.
So I would say that was the first, to me, that would be the first thing to look at is don't beg the question. Don't assume as true something you're trying to find out whether it's true or not. So I think I've done if else type of taskings, and I've worked if else type of taskings. If this is the case, then describe this. If it's not true, then describe that. And I've seen it work, and it's worked when I've done those kinds of sessions. So instead of assuming that there were monkeys that were trained, because then if that doesn't exist, then that's the target, is these monkeys that were trained, but they don't exist. So then the remote viewer can end up kind of going a little bit everywhere, just based on their own personal interests. So
which is
I would
exactly
say,
what happened, yes.
yeah, it seems like that's maybe what happened here. So I would say something along the lines of maybe describe how the oolong tea, whatever it's called, was originally harvested. That would be one way of getting it, because then either you'll get monkeys or you'll get laborers, right? That would be a clear way. If you wanted to do the if else, but that would be for, more intermediate to advanced viewers. If monkeys were trained to pick oolong tea, then describe that, describe the event or describe the process of training the monkeys. And then if no monkeys were used in the harvesting of the tea, then describe how the tea was harvested, right? You could do an if then or if else, but really I would just have asked to describe how the oolong tea was harvested originally, and then you'd probably get data about the time frame from the 16 to 1800s, and that would be a way to narrow that down. And I think that's really important, especially because so many people right now are trying to remote view. Is AI conscious? Is ChatGPT conscious? And what they tend to do is describe AI's consciousness or describe ChatGPT's consciousness, and you can't do that, because then you're just going to fabricate data. Really, you have to say, if AI is conscious, then what? And then if not, then describe something else. You have to give them the alternate choice, because if you just say, if this is conscious, then tell me all about it, you're not giving them an alternative. So then you'll just kind of get some confirmation data, but it doesn't mean that it's truth. It just means that that data exists in the data stream. Yeah, does that make sense?
So absolutely. And at the same time, if I had tasked this with the intent that this was definitely a true story, there was definitely a fact behind it, I'm confident that remote viewers would have come back with monkeys. It's all about what my intent was.
Yes, and just Cody has to go. Cody, thank you so much for participating. Your data is excellent. It was nice to have you. Thank you for getting up so early in the morning to join us. We appreciated your presence.
No worries. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
And so, Jeff, to answer your question, yes, if you had just said describe the monkeys that picked the tea, because that was your belief, people would have described monkeys picking tea. And so remote viewers are often exploited in that way. People want to prove their belief. Oh, I know that there's, I don't know, a redhead monkey at Skinwalker Ranch. So they'll say, describe the redhead monkey at Skinwalker Ranch. And then they have all this remote viewing data about this redhead monkey. And then they put it online as, oh my God, look at what we proved. No, you're just telling the story to please the tasker. And so your wording has to be very careful with that, because I've seen a lot of people who are not tasking well. And even if you're doing the if this, describe it, and if this other thing, describe that, even that you'll still get data about the if situations that's shiny, right? Because that's still part of the tasking, still part of the target. So I don't think that remote viewing is necessarily the best tool for proving beliefs that you can't verify in any other way. David, what do you think about that?
Yeah, again, it's a complicated topic. We could talk for hours on this and show examples and stuff. What I like to do is try to pull together a presentation of information so it's easy to kind of like chunk away this stuff. So you're like, oh, I see the info. It locks in better through examples and whatnot. But yeah, I would say that over time I'd see similar things to what Sasha's saying. So like for me, you could just write down that story and then like / origin. And if the origin's actually what is in that story, you should get that. But if the origin's something completely different, you should also get that too. It's just looking at the inception of where that came from without actually trying to describe that story, right? It's just more about how did that actually formulate. The other thing that I've seen, because Dames has talked about this, I've tried it, it's awesome. If you have something that's complex and you're really like you're trying to, it's like, oh, this is really complex, like this whole story thing. Like as an example, would be like a dream. You got a dream, and you're describing your dream and all this stuff. And there's one part of that dream where you're like, I really don't understand what that thing is, or I'm trying to understand more. You can just circle that piece, draw a line out, and then put a number to it. And like the person will just go in there and try to figure out. They'll explain what's relevant essentially with that data. So there are different ways to kind of attack the problem, but you should always be cautious of kind of like what the things that Sasha's describing, because you can unintentionally kind of skew people in a certain direction without actually, you're not really even trying to do that, but it can happen. So yeah, you have to be mindful about this stuff a little bit.
And so good job, everyone. That was good data. And Jeff, thank you for tasking. Thank you for doing the analysis. That was great work. Great information on that. Yeah, and it was nice to see the coherence, like David had said, in the viewer's work, and then your ability to track down the data to match it. So very good. Yeah, and I think for the next live stream, Irish Patrick, were you wanting to be the guest tasker for a second target for that one, or yes? Okay.
Sure, I don't mind. Yeah, I can do that. Just have to search for something suitable.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Something worthy.
And then Michael, you have to leave soon. So are there any questions? Are there any topics that you wanted to bring up, or?
Yes, one.
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead, Claudia.
We still have 2 targets open, right? Or am I mixing up things now?
We have one target open. We have my target open.
Okay, one. Okay.
And so, okay, I'll tell you what happened. So I gave you a target, and I put in the email, this is a conceptual target. And again, you know, feel free to go back and watch the presentation for people who are new and for people in the audience. A couple months ago, so I think 2 live streams back, maybe 3, I did a presentation on how remote viewing has largely been influenced by the fact that it was developed for military purposes. And so it has a strong bias to describing structure, landscape, human. Draw the military base, draw where the guys with the guns are, and then draw the landscape around it that will help me figure out how I can access that military base most easily at night, right? That's the kind of thing that they were looking for, and that's the kind of thing that has created this bias. And unless, as a viewer, unless you push to fit something different in your sessions, you're going to follow that default. And it ends up being an analytical overlay. So objects come in as structures, and things that are soft come in as landscape, and ideas, conceptual, come in as energetics. And so you really, I think, in order to push your boundaries as a remote viewer, you have to figure out how to work around the limitations of your protocol, or you have to tweak your protocol, or you have to learn a new protocol, maybe like mine that I'll be teaching this summer. But the point is that I didn't want to front load you, but I thought, because it's something we've talked about, I thought I'll give you the heads up. It's a conceptual target. I worked the target myself as a playful, unofficial, non-formal kind of thing. And so I had a sense of what kind of data came through for me. So I kind of felt like, okay, I know kind of what to expect, or I know that the viewers can see this. You know, things come in and it might be a concept, but you get it as a structure, or, you know, these things translate. And so I think I would rather wait a couple months and we can work on group shielding to make sure that we're not having interference coming in, disrupting your work, and then give it to you again, maybe, rather than reveal it and then I can't give it to you again. Because I actually think you guys will enjoy having worked it. And I think the data will be interesting to you each as individuals. And so I don't want to give you the feedback and spoil it. Because once I give you the feedback, I won't give that target again. So that's kind of what I decided. But that brings us to the shielding aspect. Shielding is so important. And there are a lot of different ways to do it. And it's really very simple. And a lot of it is just visualization.
Yeah,
David?
before we start that, I think Chris had a question too.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's really related to what you just said. So it's more on conceptual targets. So we always focus on structures, people, energy, blah, blah, blah. But on something more precise, I wonder if front loading is needed or not. For example, something very simple but very stupid, where I think it would be difficult to put real valuable data. Let's imagine that the tasking would be something like describe the optimal diet for effective fast fat loss for Chris in the most healthy manner. I'm wondering what would come out of that kind of session if you give zero front loading. It's conceptual, it's a process. There's no real structure. Yeah, just very conceptual targets, and I wonder what kind of stuff would come out.
See, that's a perfect example. And so David and I have worked targets like that. And we're able, you get foods, you get a sense of time of day, you get, the person's maybe really hungry for 12 intermittent fasting, right? So like the data comes through, and it comes through in ways that are just as easy as a physical description of a tower. But only if you're not trying to, what is a landscape, right? You have to be able to open your mind, and in your structure, you can't do, now I'm doing land 1. What am I seeing at land 1? Now I'm doing structure 3. What is structure 3? You can't allow those limits, those boundaries to keep you in a box, because then you're not going to be able to get that kind of data, Chris, which that's a perfect example. But if you open your mind, then when you start getting target contact, maybe you're seeing, I'm seeing meat, I'm seeing all this meat, I'm seeing blood, I'm seeing protein, I'm seeing, right? So for you would interpret that as, okay, maybe you need more of a carnivore diet, or so that you need to be able to break free from the limitations that I believe are intentional techniques to suppress remote viewers, to keep you at a level where you're never a threat to the powers that be. And so this is why I'm trying to give you safe, easy targets that are, there is a landscape, there is a pyramid, there's some, right? But I'm also trying to challenge you a little bit and say, okay, now here's a conceptual. And the problem with giving the front loading, I feel comfortable saying this is a conceptual target. I think that's good front loading, because you need to know that so that you're not spending 14 pages describing a building and a landscape for me, right? So I think that's acceptable, but I would never give more than that. So for your diet example, I would never say it's related to health, because as soon as you do that, people will start filtering everything through their beliefs, and then you'll just get what they believe is healthy, right? And I think that's really dangerous. I think that spoils it. So does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, definitely.
But you do need to, I guess what I'm saying is, if you're doing CRV, or if you're doing HRVG, if you're doing some kind of a remote viewing method that pushes you to describe a structure, an object, a building, that's going to be a problem. And unless you learn a technique that doesn't have that built in, it's up to you as a remote viewer to solve that problem for yourself. You have to solve that problem to be able to do more targets and to get better data. And then Jeff is asking, WBXO IFQ9, is that open? Let me double check on that. And David, if you wanted to say something as well about...
Well, you were going to move into shielding. I think we were going to take that offline. So I would kind of wrap up any questions and then close down the recorded live stream. Is kind of my point, and then we would move into offline discussion on shielding.
Okay, so I'm just looking up for Jeff. Well, Jeff, I'll tell you offline if that target's open. But IFQ9 WBXO, was that not this week? Was that not this month? Was that not the retask for... I'll look it up in a moment. Okay, so anything else while we're still on air before we go to... So in our off-air conversation, we'll talk about shielding. And I wanted to say for sharing your work publicly, as a remote viewer, if you don't share your work publicly, no one knows if you're a good remote viewer or not. All they have is your word for it. And no, if you want to do private work, if you want to do client work, if you want to do group work for other groups, if you want to speak with any kind of authoritative voice, you have all this experience, you have all this skill, you're great remote viewers. But if nobody knows anything about your work, they haven't seen any of your work, they don't know that, they're not going to take it on faith. Oh, I'm a great remote viewer. Yes, everybody says that online, right? Doesn't mean that they are. And so I think that having your work shown publicly is important so that you have that freedom and that independence. And it does mean that people might try to interfere with your targets. They see the TRN, maybe they try to hijack it, they try to mess with it. And we're looking for that in your data to make sure that we're tracking to see is there interference or not. That's why we're going to talk about shielding off air today. Because I think that that's how you get around that. So you want to be able to put your session out there. You want to be able to post your work publicly. And so one of the things you need to do if you're going to do that is just learn some shielding. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Any questions before we go?
I just want to double check with you that I'm not sure you have a target open at the moment. What's the TRN for it?
Yeah, I have to check.
Have I done it? I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I was like, I don't know. Once we go off air, I'll double check and I'll let you guys know who's submitted for the other target and the TRN for the open targets. And yeah, okay. And so for the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this was informative. I hope that if you're remote viewers, I hope that you learned something. If you're not a remote viewer, I hope you were inspired by these amazing remote viewers and the work that they did and are maybe excited and interested in becoming one.
Yep.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, I agree. I hope everybody's watching enjoys the presentation, enjoys the analysis, enjoys the coherency between the viewers in a group setting. I think it's quite amazing, and I hope that it does inspire you to possibly in the near future contribute work to this live stream or to others publicly, other groups or whatever publicly. But I hope it encourages you to basically engage in the process more. So I think without any further ado, I'd say
I'm just going to say as well, I will later today in the comments down below, I'll put the link for Chris Cano's YouTube channel and his website where he's doing sports predictions. And Patrick Anderkerk has a Dutch remote viewing Facebook group, so we'll put that in the comments down below. And Patrick Flanagan also has a remote viewing practice group on Facebook where you can work targets. And so we'll put that in the comments down below as well. And so thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. And we'll see you next month. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.